Good afternoon, everyone. This is Allie Mastardo, Senior Association Manager of PPRA. Thank you for joining us today for our second webinar in the 2022 How I Built This Network webinar series. Today, we will hear from Polk County in Florida and how they improved their network condition and increased budgets in just 7 years. We do have you all on mute for the webinar. If you have any questions, please use the question function on the sidebar of your screen, and we will answer them at the end. This webinar is being recorded and a copy will be provided to all registered attendees via email and will be posted on roadresource.org. Today's facilitator for the webinar is Lindsay Matoush, founder and CEO of Vario Consulting. As a marketing firm, PPRA partnered with Vario to create roadresource.org. We will now turn it over to Lindsay for the webinar.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I have the great privilege of interviewing agencies from all over the country who have demonstrated incredible progress on their network. And I am really excited to introduce you all to Austin today. He, in really a relatively short period of time, has led their agency through some tremendous change and impact. And you're gonna learn a lot today. So I'll quickly give an overview of the initiative itself, and then we'll turn it over to Austin. So my name is Lindsay Matoush. We are the strategy and creative partner behind roadresource.org. Austin Potts is the pavement manager at Polk County, Florida. He started his career in search and rescue for the Navy before entering the engineering world in 2011, where he started as a consulting engineer, worked his way up to the vice president of an engineering division at a civil company called Econ South in Florida, and has been with Polk County since about 2015, where he started originally at the bridge department before now spearheading the efforts on the pavement management side of things. So just a bit about who brings you this webinar and what we're doing here. This effort is organized by the Pavement Preservation and Recycling Alliance, which is an effort of 3 associations: the Asphalt Emulsion Manufacturers Association, the International Slurry Surfacing Association, and the Asphalt Recycling and Reclaiming Association. The 3 of them came together to form PPRA, really at the request of agencies saying, interested in learning about all of these different treatments, but could I do it in one place? Is there anything that can make that a little more simple for me to learn my way around? The single goal of everything we do at Road Resource through PPRA is this idea of empowering agencies to be the best possible stewards of their road networks and their taxpayer dollars. Towards that end, we launched this webinar series called How I Built This Network, where we interview folks like Austin who can demonstrate network level progress, who can show a really robust use of treatments across the entire curve, and an understanding of when to use what treatment in the toolbox. And they've worked to stretch their dollars as far as possible. You can learn more about this whole effort at roadresource.org/better. And when we started this initiative, we interviewed agencies from all over North America to understand what's the difference between agencies who are feeling kind of like they're behind every year and practicing sort of that worst first thinking, and those agencies who have done something to really change the way they manage their network and gain ground across the entire network. And there are 4 things that we observed that were common to agencies who could really demonstrate that network level progress. So number 1 was they have a big treatment toolbox and they know how to put the right treatment on the right road at the right time. Number 2, they don't just think about what am I going to do with this road, or even just what am I going to do this year, but how does my treatment plan this year impact my overall network level progress next year and beyond. They pay attention to the success and the innovation that people around them are experiencing, and they also learn from similar agencies in similar regions or climates, and they're in touch with the industry at large. Most of these guys have really great relationships, and gals, with their contracting partners, with their manufacturing partners. They're paying attention to the research. They're plugged in and learning about what's happening out there so they can bring that learning to their agencies and their taxpayers. And so ultimately what we were inspired by was this kind of challenger mentality. What we have noticed is in every case that we've done one of these webinars, or that we've really found this sort of network level progress, it required this sort of challenger champion thinking. There had to be an internal champion who was just saying, you know what, there's got to be a better way. I'm going to find it and I'm going to execute it. And then they began putting the steps in place, from talking to electeds, to communicating to taxpayers, to building partnerships, to learning from the industry, implementing new treatments, to really start their network on this path to success. So again, you can find out more and find more resources online. What we'll do today is we'll just give you a little overview of Polk County. We'll talk about before and after, before they started this new way of thinking, and how they're doing today. Austin's going to walk you through a really cool comparison of what happens to their network under these optimized conditions versus a worst first approach. And then I'll follow questions if you want to ask as we go. But we'll try to reserve some time for questions at the end. So that's enough for me. Austin, tell us about Polk County, Florida, and give us a little bit of an overview of the county itself.
Sure. So let me start by saying thank you for all the attendees for joining today, and allowing me to present a little bit here about Polk County and in our program, how we manage our pavement management program. So this first slide here, if you don't know, Polk County is located in Central Florida. We're the 4th largest county in the state by land area. And currently we're managing 2,535 centerline miles of paved roads. If you look at us on the map, we're kind of centrally located between the city of Orlando and city of Tampa, right along the I-4 corridor, kind of runs through the northern portion of Polk County, but pretty central to the state of Florida. And there's a map popping up on the right-hand side for reference. Area-wise, you can see state of Rhode Island brought in next to us. We're a fairly large county here in the state of Florida. So here's kind of a composition of our network and where we fall as far as miles managed. You'll see in the table on the left-hand side, with 2,535 miles, that puts us ahead of a handful of states, those being Hawaii, Rhode Island, and New Jersey, as well as DC. And then in the table on the right-hand side, you can see that our network is really a 50-50 split between residential segments and collectors, those being rural and urban collector segments.
Okay, so if that's a network, big network and growing network. And one thing I want to make sure to say up front is when we do these webinars, sometimes agencies are like, gosh, my budget, my miles are so much smaller than that. But I can tell you I've interviewed agencies small and large, and I have seen the same principles apply and create the same type of impact, no matter what size your agency is, or no matter what it looks like for you to get started or to move further. So Austin, tell us a little bit about kind of what spurred this move to more optimized and proactive thinking, and give us a little bit of the before and after comparison.
Sure. So as you can see in the table here, we'll kind of compare past practices here, what kind of pushed us to make some changes, and then what we're doing from that point forward up to today. Prior to 2015, we basically only had 2 tools in our toolbox. Those were mill and inlay treatments and overlay treatments. And we use those on every segment, regardless of functional classification or other factors. So with that approach, it really limited the number of miles we could treat per year. We were somewhere between 70 and 90 miles treated per year on average. And really, you know, the obvious disadvantage there is that using more intensive treatments on some of those local segments really reduced the number of miles we were able to treat, and didn't help us optimize our budget. Since then, we've added a handful of treatments to our toolbox. We'll go through some of those on a future slide here. But that expansion of our toolbox has really helped us to increase the number of miles that we now treat As you can see, nearly doubling up to 120 to 150 mile range per year. With this year, even with increased unit cost and other delays, we're going to be at the north end of that range, around 150 miles treated this fiscal year. So really the big advantage there, the addition of those preservation treatments as well as a number of reconstruction treatments really allowed us to increase our footprint, our miles treated per year across our network. So really here, this is some of the progress we're going to show throughout the presentation today. Like I just mentioned, we've really been able to increase the number of miles treated, nearly doubling that. We've had a significant savings and projecting significant savings into the future. We've also been able to reduce our backlog and show a projected backlog reduction into the future as well. And then an improved overall network condition. And we'll kind of hone into some of the data there and look at some of those local segments like I was just referencing, and kind of look at the way the miles are trending as far as poor condition versus good condition. Okay, so a lot going on here in this slide, but the key things to focus on are the milestones down at the bottom. Those are shown with the blue arrows. And then we are showing how those milestones had an impact on our number of miles treated as well as our annual budget. So the number of miles treated is the tealish green line, and the annual budget is shown with the yellow line. So the first milestone was our expansion of our toolbox, the additional treatments that we added. That took place not all at once, but started in 2015, really gave us the ability, you can see the number of miles treated climbing up there starting in 2015. And that was really due to that increase in treatments that we had available to use. The way we did that, we used what we call an alternative treatments contract, which was a complement to our existing what we call rehab contract, which covered the mill and inlay and overlay projects. Through that process, we were able to justify an increased budget moving forward. We went from about 12 million there going into 2015 up to 15 million through the 2017-2018 year. And that's when so Agile Assets was in the works from that time frame, starting in 2016, I believe, up through 2018. But we didn't go live until that fiscal year 18-19 year with Agile Assets managing our payment management system. So if you look at the annual budget there, you'll see a significant jump up to 18 million that year. That was based on a lot of the analytic capabilities that we were able to present to our upper management and kind of justify that increase. You'll also notice the number of miles dips there that year, miles treated. It's a bit of an outlier. We were only able to use our rehab contract for a small portion of that year. But I think what it shows here is the benefit of having that alternative treatments contract in place, and really take advantage of the preservation side of that contract to continue to treat more miles than we had in the past, and not let go of any of our funds that we had that fiscal year due to that contract we weren't able to use. Yeah. And so going a little bit more in detail on that Agile Assets software implementation, prior to 2018, we basically managed the network with a worst first approach using an Excel spreadsheet, and that had been done for some time that way. We also used public sector software, specifically Infor, to manage the inventory, work orders, costs, and things like that. But we never had it set up for analytic capabilities or any kind of future projection type output. So with the help of a consultant that we brought on board, we purchased Agile Assets and began with our setup and use of the pavement analyst module. And that allowed us to create degradation curves based on historical data, as well as decision trees for surface types and functional classifications. And I'll add to that, we're currently in the process of adding some additional modules through Agile Assets, those being Ridge Analyst and Maintenance Manager. Those have been working in the background as far as setup goes for some time now. And I think we have a go live date later this year, sometime late October, early November. And training for county staff is about to kick off. I think ultimately our goal, all our assets will be managed through Agile Assets software package.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned previously, we added a number of treatments starting in 2015. This slide shows the bulk of those additions, those being rejuvenation, patching and crack sealing, chip and cape seals, microsurfacing, fog and scrub seals, and then on the reconstruction side, cold in place recycling and full depth reclamation. There's some notes there on kind of what we expect to get with those treatments as far as pavement life is concerned. Those do fluctuate, and as our rating and our inspection data comes in from our rating inspections, you know, the degradation curves we have for those treatments gets adjusted. So it may not reflect what you see in your area specifically, but so far that's kind of where we're trending. The one thing I will note here as we're looking at this slide, the bulk of the increased miles that we've been able to treat since 2015 has come from the two treatments on the left-hand side, rejuvenation and microsurfacing, which are on the preservation side of the spectrum. And then one other thing to note here, we in our area, we typically don't apply just a crack seal as a standalone treatment. We'll typically couple that and follow it with either a micro or a thin lift overlay. But crack seal by itself is not a popular option here.
So Austin, if I look at this slide a couple slides ago, there's two key things that created this pretty significant jump for you. One was expanding your treatment toolbox, and the other was implementing a pavement management system and being able to move from having the data to doing that more predictive planning, which allowed you to justify a budget increase. What I want to do, and I have seen this over and over again with every agency we've interviewed, when people start really broadening the toolbox and being able to lower the equivalent annualized cost of their treatments, have more options for the right treatment, the right road at the right time, they start just having more money to treat more miles. So one thing I want to do is just quickly take people to the treatment toolbox and show them where they can kind of find some of those resources on Road Resource. Before I do, I wanted to ask you, what do you consider when thinking about adding new treatments? Is that something you regularly look for? And then what kind of process do you use as you put treatments in your toolbox?
Sure. And so there's probably some obvious ones that everybody would look at and maybe some less obvious ones. So let me start with the obvious ones. We're going to consider unit costs, expected life extension from that treatment, familiarity with the contractors that would be applying it. And then another one that's pretty specific to our area and this year, we're going to look at availability of materials. If anybody else is joining from Central Florida, I'm sure you're aware there's an aggregate shortage in our area at the moment that has kind of altered some of our planned resurfacing groups this year. But you know, if we're going to implement a new treatment, we want to make sure the materials required to apply that treatment are available as needed for our area. On the less obvious side, we're going to look at aesthetics, like I mentioned with crack seal. You know, we want to have a good finished product that not only satisfies our needs on the pavement management side, but also the taxpayers, you know, when they take a look at our finished product, we want it to be presentable as well. Procurement considerations, depending on the quantity you're using, number of manufacturers or suppliers, There's going to be different procurement considerations that need to be considered, and maybe a meeting with procurement as well to talk through those. We're going to look at our Department of Transportation FDOT usage of that treatment. Is it something they're considering? Is it something that's maybe on their innovative products list? Or is it something that isn't being looked at all at the moment and maybe needs some local support? And then lastly, I think probably anybody looking to implement something new would want to see the data behind it. So we're always going to ask for any testing data that's available so we can scour through that and make sure that it foots the bill for what we're looking to do with that treatment.
Yep. Thank you. So one resource I want to make sure to leave you guys with, if you haven't checked it out, is on roadresource.org, and it's what we call the treatment toolbox. So this is a screenshot, and we'll take you here. So one thing we hear, we talked to a lot of agencies who are anywhere from just getting started at this, maybe they're mostly kind of where Austin was in 2015, using just a couple treatments and finding that every year their network's getting worse and they're wanting to learn more about preservation. Sometimes people use 2 or 3 preservation and recycling treatments and they're looking for a few more. Here's a great resource if you're looking to expand that toolbox. So if you get on roadresource.org, and for those of you who haven't been, it's a free resource. You go to the treatment toolbox, and here's a couple tools. So this is the pavement criteria tool. And if you get in here, you can put in different criteria about your pavement, what the condition is, what the distress is. And you'll notice that as I start inputting criteria, the treatments that probably aren't appropriate for that road start to gray out, leaving me with bolded options of what could be appropriate. And as I scroll across each of these or hover on them, I can see kind of what part of the pavement or what level of distress this treatment might address. So if I wanted to learn a little bit about microsurfacing, I click on this and it tells me a brief description of what it is, what I can expect to save, what the environmental benefits are, some pictures, and it will take me to the Treatment Resource Center. The Treatment Resource Center here, you can access it either through that door or just straight under the treatment toolbox, and then Treatment Resource Center. And here you see 18 different treatments. Every single one of these treatments has 23 different pages of technical resources to help you be successful in learning about and implementing new treatments. So here's what they look like. Again, just high-level benefits. What is it? What issues does it address? What are the attributes? How is it commonly combined with other treatments? We see a lot of agencies combining treatments to sort of stretch resources even further. And then you can learn about different variations, expectations. How long can I expect that to last if I'm applying it optimally versus in more of a stopgap approach to pavement that's already fairly deteriorated. All kinds of resources for pre-construction and specification design, construction, QA, and then there's on all of them, there's research and performance that features brief summaries and then full reports of some of the best research out there about each treatment, success stories that show you who around the country is using this treatment and how it's working for them, and then a photo gallery on some of these treatments if you want to see how they're working and what it looks like. Otherwise, they're kind of scattered throughout where you can kind of see what these different treatments look like in action. And then if you want to find a member of EMA or ISA near you who can help you in the learning curve, because this is what they do, you can click on this bar right here. The other tool available to you, again, under Treatment Toolbox, is the photo criteria. So this is where, again, you can put in your primary distress. So if you put poor ride quality, for instance, or oxidation and raveling, it's going to show you specific pictures of what that looks like. And as you hover over them, it gives you what is it, probably what I'm looking at here for a PCI. And then if I click on it, what are some possible solutions that might address that issue? And then if I click on any one of those treatments, it's going to take me back to the Treatment Resource Center. The other thing I like for everybody to know is right up here in the right-hand column, there's a button that says login or sign up. If you do that, you can create a profile that will allow you to populate the site in a way that only you can see with your costs and the life extension relevant to you. Austin talked about how they're watching so closely how many years they can expect out of each treatment so that they're protecting the accuracy and validity of the data in the system. If they can get 8 years instead of 6 years, really changes what the system's going to recommend. And so it's really important that as you use these tools, you customize it in a way that's relevant to you. You're the only one who ever sees that data, but you can do that right up here. And if you're joining, say you're not familiar with Road Resource and what we do, make sure you get online here and sign up for our e-newsletter. This is where we just keep you apprised to the webinars and the workshops that we do throughout the year to make sure that you are equipped with all of this great knowledge. So wanted to make sure you guys had something you could go back and apply. We'll show you a couple other tools as we go. But Austin, take us back. I think this is one of the coolest sections of your presentation where you actually compare an optimized approach to a worst first approach. So I will let you speak to that a little bit and talk about some of the goals and the project selection, how you approach that.
Sure, and real quick before I get into that, I will say on our end, we've bounced our data off of what you show on PPRA and the Resource Center, just to get an idea. Are we within industry standards here, or are we outside the range? We've used as many sources as we've been able to find to bounce our data off of, just to make sure we're where we should be or where we expect to be. So kind of digging down in the weeds a little bit to make sure that our push to an optimized approach is successful and is going to be successful. We've had to take a look at a handful of scenarios to kind of prove that thesis. So to do that, we set up a scenario to run the optimized first, our former worst first approach, with the goals of the optimized approach being improve the network condition, minimize cost to taxpayers, and maximize benefit to the traveling public. Our scenario was run with a $15 million annual budget and was run across an 8-year period. And basically using agile assets, we ran an optimized analysis for the 8-year period, then a worst first for the 8-year period, and compared the results, which we'll go into here on the next few slides. So this first one here shows what the PCI would look like for both scenarios. As you can see, the scenario started in year 1 or 2020, and the green line represents the optimized approach, and the yellow line is our worst first. Both start roughly at a PCI around 70. The worst first approach ends the 8-year period at a 39, and the optimized ends that same 8-year period at a 47. A difference of 8 points, which I'm sure most people would agree, the optimized approach is significantly better across that 8-year span. What you'll notice is both lines are downward trending. What does that mean? That means our program's underfunded. We aren't able to maintain a PCI of 70 across those 8 years without an increased budget. So regardless of our efforts as far as new treatments and pavement management system, we're basically showing here that we are following an optimized approach that will be more advantageous to us, but without additional funding, we will steadily decline as far as average network PCI goes. And this is just kind of a summary of those points I just hit on. Both scenarios show an underfunded budget with a PCI that's constantly decreasing. However, it's easy to see there the optimized approach is far better. I think most folks would take an 8-point jump across their network over that 8-year period over what you get on the worst first approach. And really, we were able to show this visually to our upper management through the use of agile assets and ultimately justify our switch to an optimized approach.
Yeah. The other thing I think is just so cool about this is it's the same amount of money, and even though they're both decreasing over time, by spending the same amount of money and just spending it differently, you have better roads by 8 points. And that's really responsible, right?
Yeah, like you said, that's our goal, and being responsible with taxpayers' dollars is something we're keen on. So looking here, what we're showing is backlog costs between the two scenarios. Again, the yellow line's where's first, green line being optimized. Both start around 160 million in backlog costs at the beginning of the scenario. But as you can see at the end, there's basically a $28 million difference between the two. Again, the worst first approach is more expensive, and we're increasing our backlog with both approaches, which is a reflection of that underfunded. But again, most folks would agree, I'm sure the $28 million reduction in backlog at the end of that period would be advantageous to any program.
Yeah.
So this takes a look a little bit more into the data. It shows road segment condition across the 8-year scenario. This is the final result at year 8, what it would look like. On the left-hand side is the optimized approach, right-hand side is worst first. And what you'll notice is the number of miles in both poor and at-risk condition are decreasing or are lower on the optimized approach and higher on the good condition for the optimized approach. Basically a 28% increase in good condition and a 13% reduction on poor condition between the two approaches. This slide here, we're looking at total miles treated over the 8-year period. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see that with the optimized approach, we were able to treat 269 additional miles, which is a 42% increase over the worst first approach. Another thing you'll notice here, the number of miles treated per year is declining in the outer years. That's a reflection of that underfunded budget, but really what's happening is when we run the optimized approach, you're starting to see that the larger benefit to the network is going to be on those more intensive treatments for the roads that have really fallen behind, where you use your preservation in the beginning years. So this shows you definitely are able to treat more miles under the optimized approach. Also shows we definitely need an increase to our budget to help keep that number of miles treated consistent in the outer years. But I think most folks would agree taking the optimized approach here would be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
Taking it a step further, drilling down into some of those budget issues I've been referencing, we wanted to look at what would happen if we had to reduce our budget or if we were able to adequately fund our program. So this is kind of a summary of how we ran that analysis. We set up 2 additional scenarios, one being the $10 million per year for the 8 years. That's significantly underfunded, and then adequately funded the program, which would have been $35 million a year for 8 years, and compared that to our previously shown $15 million per year analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So the yellow line is what we saw before, the $15 million per year, starting PCI of 70 at the end of that 8-year span. It's a 47. Both of the other 2 scenarios we're showing here are following an optimized approach, just with different budgets applied. So the red line being significantly underfunded, that ends closer to where the worst first did, down at a 37 when you significantly underfund our program. And then obviously the adequately funded, 70 PCI at the end of that is quite attractive, but the budget needed to do that is significantly higher. If we look at that in today's terms, we're at $18 million per year right now. We basically need to double our current budget to try to hit that 70 PCI target across 8 years.
Well, and what I think is interesting about your approach and the data that you have, Austin, is that you're not just saying, hey, we can do better with more money. You're saying we can do better with the same money by managing differently and more proactively, but you're able to really show by having sufficient money, we can do significantly better. And I think that's that, electeds would really appreciate.
You hit the nail on the head, Lindsay. We're really showing two things, right? We're showing how we apply our funds. It is a more economical approach with better results, while at the same time showing what would happen if we were able to increase or adequately fund our program.
Yep.
So a little bit more of the data on this scenario here, as you compare the three. The backlog costs across all 8 years. Again, the yellow line's a representation of what we looked at before with that $15 million per year scenario. The significantly underfunded jumps up quite a bit, $300 million backlog at the end of 8 years. But if you notice the $35 million adequately funded, our backlog has dropped significantly with that. So to calculate that ROI, we're going to compare the 15 million per year budget versus the 35. You just multiply those annual budgets out across all 8 years and then tack on the backlog at the end and subtract the difference between what you have left over on the 15 million from the 35, and it's a $42.5 million difference at the end of that scenario.
It's incredible. The other thing I thought it was so interesting that you included an underfunded budget, or what would happen if your budget was decreased, right? It feels like such a preventative measure when road budgets are always on the table, to be able to show people if this thought ever crosses your mind, look at what happens. I think it's just a really smart and simple and logical walkthrough for people who aren't, living and breathing and eating and sleeping roads all day.
Yeah, I think with 3 simple slides, we can really open someone's eyes to what reducing our budget or significantly underfunding the program would look like.
So how did electeds respond to all of this, Austin, when you shared this? What was that like?
So we've had a supportive group of elected officials. We, of course, the lines of communication from us up through our chain of command to the elected officials has been key. We want to make sure every step of the way they know what we're doing, what we're trying to do, our goals, and where we're trying to take the program, so that they have really up-to-date information and can relay that to the residents in our area. But we've been fortunate. We've had a supportive elected officials in Polk County.
Austin, you have a couple of questions I'm just going to pause and ask you because they make sense. I was asking you about electeds, public perception. This is a great question. Talk about any public perception of more frequent road work or lane closures, say every 3 to 5 years for preservation versus a mill and resurface at 15 to 20 year frequency. Considering the generally rural setting in Polk, what impact will be expected in a more urban setting?
I think I got most of that. As far as the perception for the residents, I get quite frequent calls when we do a rehab project and then follow it 2 or 3 years later with a preservation, like a rejuvenation, with the cookie cutter statement being, you were just on that road, why are you guys back with a treatment, just a year or 2 later? So we walk them through the importance of preservation, trying to get them to understand it's important to keep good roads good, and that over the long run, our money's better spent spreading it out amongst all treatments that we have available than it is trying to go after our worst segments in the county. To back that up, before we apply a preservation treatment, we have informational handouts in the form of door hangers that we put on all the residents' doors before we get to that area, to kind of give them some additional tidbits on what that treatment involves, what their impact will be, and what our expectation is of that treatment. That goes a long way with helping get the information out there on what we're trying to do and why it's important.
Yeah.
Sounded like there might have been a second part maybe to that question.
They were just asking if Polk's a little bit more rural, would you anticipate any other kind of feedback or pushback in a more urban setting that might impact? I'm assuming the question is around a higher density population with more frequent shutdowns.
Yeah, I would say so. You may have some more public outreach that's needed there. I know, for instance, when we do widening projects here, we do public meetings, quite a few of them in advance, to get the information out, what our plan is, what the impacts will be, anticipated schedules, things like that. So probably more of those type of programs or planning would be necessary. In Polk specifically, we actually have a wide range. The south half of the county is fairly rural. We call it kind of the Groves area, where a lot of the orange groves are, Grove roads, low traffic counts, but a lot of truck traffic. And then, in the northern part of the county, we've got the city of Lakeland, and then on 27, city of Davenport, city of Haines City. We work closely with those municipalities as well to try to do joint projects where, the county boundary ends, city boundary begins. Do we want to look at doing the same treatment on that road with what we call an interlocal agreement? So we do have a little bit of experience with what the city goes through, and they definitely have to consider additional pushback or additional need for information from the public.
The other thing, and we'll share with you some taxpayer resources in a little bit. The other thing I've heard agencies say who do this really proactively is having a proactive communication plan is really important, kind of getting ahead of it. And the more that you're able to stand up and talk about a plan, the more that residents tend to understand and eventually can buy into the idea that, hey, I guess I'd rather have my road shut down for a day or a morning here and there versus be out of commission for 2 weeks with the time it takes for conventional reconstruction. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving for the sake of time. So I asked Austin to kind of synthesize some key commitments that they maintained. And before he introduces these, I want you to know who this is coming from. Austin, I just found out that you are the 2022 award winner, you and your team at Polk County, for the Jim Sorensen Award, which is just incredible. And for those of you who do not know what that is, I think it's one of the most prestigious awards in pavement management. It comes from FP2, or the Foundation for Pavement Preservation, in honor of Jim Sorensen, who's been one of the nation's biggest advocates for managing our roadways better. And it just really honors someone or a team of people who have decided we are going to do the very best possible things we can for our roads and for our taxpayers. So first of all, a huge congratulations to you on winning that award and your team. And second of all, when you hear these key commitments, folks, now that I think maybe they have a little more weight coming from a Jim Sorensen winner. So Austin, congratulations, and take it away.
Sure, Lindsay. Thank you for the recognition, by the way. We appreciate that. And of course, that's kind of attributed to our whole team here. My predecessor specifically, I'm sure a lot of you know Katia Delgado in the industry. She really built what we have today and are using, and I've kind of sat in the driver's seat since I took over for her. But our team, our chain of command up through the director of roadage and drainage, as well as our elected officials, really what made that possible for us to even be nominated for the award, and then to be awarded here recently was excellent news, and we're proud of that fact. So yeah, as you can see on the slide here, some of our key commitments along the way, and we've kind of touched on some of these already, but keeping our good roads good through preservation. Like I said, that's not always easy to explain to everyone why that's important or how that necessarily works when you're talking in comparison to a worse first approach, especially when you have a resident who assumes or believes their road is the worst road in the county. That's a tough thing to sell, but that is one of our key commitments, and we stick to that year in and year out since our changes have been made. And going right along with that, using less intensive treatments on local roads where we can. That's basically saying, we're everywhere where it makes sense. We've got good PCI ratings. We're going to use preservation as a primary treatment, not a fallback option. Learning and going to conferences, keeping up with the industry, that's a big one. There's always something new. There's a new material, new treatment, new application, a number of things. Staying current is a challenge, especially at the municipal level with all the additional tasks at hand. But I think that a good use of time is, talking with contractors, seeing when they're going to be close with a new treatment you're interested in, and getting up and going out to see it, learning everything you can about the new things that are available in your area for your use. And then recycling when possible and utilizing existing sources to maximize annual budget. This really rings true this year for us. Like I said, we have an aggregate shortage in Central Florida. As a direct result of that, we've significantly increased our FDR this year. Of course, we'll still need larger aggregate for our surface lifts there, but that increase in FDR has helped us to keep things moving with our program when otherwise we would possibly be shut down for a month or so. And then lastly, being objective and proactive towards new treatments. Anything new is typically a hard sell, so you really got to know what the drivers are for making that decision, why you'd want to use a new treatment, or why you wouldn't want to use a new treatment. So, but keeping an open mind there and not just saying we've got our tools, this is it, this is what we're going to use indefinitely. I think keeping an open mind there's something that we practice daily here.
I want to take some of you. We have some really good questions coming in, and we'll explain, or we'll try to get to quite a few of those in a bit. I want to take you guys to a tool. Sometimes what we hear is, you're looking at Austin, who's been using this pavement management system for a while, and has these beautiful charts and graphs. But where do you start? Or if you've already started, how can you get just a little bit smarter about analyzing possible treatment plans and the impact on your network? So I want to take you to another tool on Road Resource. There's a lot here under the network optimization section. So if you kind of see this, my pointer on the screen under network optimization, everything on here, well, at least 5 of these 6 options all have a calculator that you can use to explore some of this, but I'll quickly take you to the remaining service life calculator. This is a really valuable tool. And the basic idea of this, if you're not familiar, I'll hit it very simply. If I have if a pavement lasts 12 years or 15 years or 20 years, every year of that pavement's life, it loses what we call a mile year of life. So a 500-mile network loses 500 mile years of life annually. We're just turning it into a simple equation, right? So the idea is, if my treatment plan for this year isn't adding more than 500 mile years of life to my network, then my network is going to slowly deteriorate. So this is a cool just example of an agency that took a $4.5 million budget on 1,000 lane miles and said, okay, if I do a worst first approach and I spend most of my money in reconstruction and rehabilitation, I'm able to add, and you can kind of see a potential treatment matrix here, what they might have done. I'm gonna treat about 25 lane miles and add 433 mile years of life, contributing to a network deficit of 567 miles of life lost from the overall network that year. If I take the same amount of money, but I spend it differently, I take some of those reconstruction projects, and instead of doing a remove and replace, I recycle. I do a full depth reclamation, or I do a little bit more recycling here in this rehab component, and then I take the savings from those conversions and spend it further up the curve, spending the same amount of money, I'm able to treat 200 lane miles and inject 1,100 mile years of life into the network for a total network gain. So this is just another kind of simple way to look at it. And this is a calculator that lets you input your total network lane miles, your budget, and then you can input treatments and say, okay, if I were to do a scrub seal on 5 lane miles at this cost, again, you can edit the unit cost here, or if you log in and create a profile, it will automatically repopulate this with the life extension you experience and the cost that is relevant to your area. And then you can add your total treatment plan for the year. If I do a microsurfacing on 10 miles, you can kind of go through and add your whole treatment plan and see how many lane miles I'm treating and what the total impact to my network is. So this is a really cool calculator for you to pay attention to, and there's videos online that teach you how to use it in the webinar section where we do a really deep dive into this concept. Austin, one of the questions that you have been asked is what treatments to start with out of the various preservation treatments you use. If you just had 1 or 2 to start with, what do you recommend? And then what did you add later?
So I think quite a bit goes into that decision, not only the project manager's opinion or thoughts on that, but your inspectors in the field as well, what they're going to be comfortable with learning and being able to understand the process. In my opinion, that'd probably be like we did, a rejuvenation treatment or a micro treatment, something that's fairly simple on the application side and specification side. Is easy to relay and teach your inspection staff what needs to happen to implement that treatment. That's pretty much what we did. That's probably why I favor that. But I think whatever not only you but your staff will be comfortable with to get started with is probably key. So if I had to pinpoint it, I'd probably say rejuvenation would be a good one for most folks to give a start on.
Okay, so talk about your network today.
Sure. So this is kind of drilled down into a portion of the network and the functional classification of local residential and local commercial segments. And this is generated through our 3rd set of inspections. We inspect for pavement condition every 2 years. And 2021 was our last inspection, which was our 3rd round of inspections. So we are starting to get condition data in, as well as a whole host of other data through our inspection team that we can review and make changes on. This here is what we're showing, or how we're trending as far as poor condition, fair condition, and good condition goes. And what you'll see is in both fair and good condition for this functional classification, we're trending upwards, and in the poor condition, we're trending down. Now, it's not a huge jump across that 5 or 6 year period, but like we've shown, we've had an underfunded program, but we're still trending in the right direction here on local segments, which has been kind of one of our initiatives to focus on those with some of the less intensive treatments and take advantage of the tools in our toolbox. So this is kind of a direct representation of our really first round of data review and showing that our plan is starting to work. We are starting to get positive results and trend in the right direction here.
Yeah, awesome. I think you've already covered this one, so I will skip this question. And we asked that one a little bit earlier. Is there anything else you want to add, Austin, that you didn't already cover about communicating with electeds or taxpayers?
I would say if you're going to pinpoint some advice, one of the top 3 would definitely be a good line of communication. You can understand your goal and be focused on it daily, but if the folks who are above you and are really going to make the decisions that help you implement that plan aren't familiar or on board, then it's going to be key for you to communicate that to them and really justify, why this is a process that needs to take place. And then along with that, patience. That if you look at our process, it took us a number of years, I think something like 3 years, to go from deciding this was something we wanted to go after to actually going live with a pavement management system. There were plenty of bumps, setbacks, delays, funding issues, everything you can think of along the way. So being patient throughout the process is a real key thing to focus on too.
Yeah. On the website, guys, there is a whole section of free communication tools for taxpayers. And these are yard signs, social media posts, a press release, door hangers, and these are all here to help you communicate with the public about like, hey, why are we treating these good roads, right? To get a little bit of credit for asphalt recycling. That's really cool to taxpayers that you're recycling those roads in place. So this is just some free tools. You can find them on Road Resource under Resources, and then this blue box that says Agency Communication Tools. For those of you who are asking about, can you get a copy of the PowerPoint or the webinar? If you click on the webinar series here, you can see all of our historical webinars, and the one from today will be on here as well. Advice for a pavement management system. So one of the things that I want to just cover quickly, Austin, is people, when we train on road resource around the country, one of the things people say is pavement management systems are really, really helpful, but they're only as good as the information that you put in them. And we've had people say that they almost feel frustrated by their pavement management system if the system isn't reflecting data that's accurate to these treatments, or if these treatments aren't, if the more optimized treatments aren't loaded in appropriately. So I wanted you to just quickly hit advice for a pavement management system.
Sure, and I think that one of the challenges, especially talking with our neighbors here, that most folks are going to run into is on the inspection side. We do our condition inspections in-house, but how do you confirm that you're getting consistent results there? You want to make sure that your inspection staff are, we basically do windshield inspections, right? So there's some speculation in the results to that. So what we do, we have calibration meetings basically every 6 months or so, I think, and basically engineering staff as well as inspection staff get together, rate some roads together, and make sure that we're all rating roads with the same perspective. Like you said, that good data in, you get good results. Bad data, not so much. So with our pavement management system, which we've kind of explained in detail, just some thoughts for the future there. Our next task will be to establish or set a target PCI and try to maintain or hit that target across our network average. So that's kind of looking ahead a little bit, some advice there. But yeah, really consistent inspection data going in, and we've got a standard operating procedure manual that we've put together to make sure our inspectors understand how that process is supposed to happen. And then, like I said, we have calibration meetings to follow behind and confirm that that is what's happening.
Just a quick question. Do you do in-house pavement condition surveys yearly, and do you use a road profiler or just an inspector?
Just an inspector, and we do them every 2 years. So since implementation, we have 3 rounds of inspections. Our network split up into, I believe, the 5 commissioner districts. So we have 5 inspectors throughout the county that cover the 2,535 miles of our network.
Okay. Want to make sure you guys know before we wrap here, and we'll take another 10 minutes or so and answer some more of these questions. But before we wrap, we have a Roadvocate training coming up November 1st through the 3rd. If you like some of what you saw on the Road Resource website, We do an in-depth training over 3 days. It's 2.5 hours over lunch each day, and we cover all the tools on the website, and we make it a working session. We'll have you bring data for your network, we'll have you pump it into the calculators, and the goal is to create really valuable time and also learning from other agencies to learn more about it. We'll cover the life cycle cost calculator. We'll cover some tools on how to prioritize which treatments. We'll go into that remaining service life calculator. We'll show you which treatments to use. We'll show you how to use the login, taxpayer tools. We have some other cool videos and stuff. Every time we do this, people rate it as one of the best trainings that they've done on all of this stuff, and you do leave with, it's almost like a network boot camp. And I think a lot of the value is not just hearing folks like me talk, but really getting a chance to learn from folks like Austin. So it's $50 for government agencies. But if you know EMA, ERA, and ISSA members, you can often get them to take care of that for you, especially if you have a limited training budget. And we would recommend you and just others in your department joining for this. So you can learn more about that on roadresource.org or sign up for that e-newsletter, and we'll email you as soon as registration opens. We take about 50 spots. Last thing is just this LinkedIn page here. One of our goals at PPRA is just to set the table for you guys to kind of learn from the best. This is our LinkedIn page, and check it out and join the conversation with other agencies who are trying to essentially do more with less. So with that, I'm going to field some questions. So we'll ask Austin. Austin, can you hang on for about 10 more minutes and answer some questions?
Yeah, no problem.
Awesome. Just quickly, what is the rating protocol?
As far as what system do we use?
No, I think for that inspection, what is rating protocol? ASTM D6433 is the question.
I'm not sure. I'd have to check with Katya. I know we use a PCI rating system here with a slight modification for us specifically. But I have a standard operating procedure that we use for that I could share if requested.
Okay. Do you, there's a question about how you decide what's optimized versus worse first. What factors went into the optimized scenario to make it optimized?
Sure. So that's a long drawn out answer, but just to kind of try to summarize it. Inside Agile Assets, there's a number of factors. Just touching on a couple, is a segment on a school route, an evacuation route, especially here in Florida where, Hurricane Central, evacuation routes, trip counts, truck traffic counts, the types of degradation, and we have a decision tree that basically walks through all of those factors to determine the best use of those funds. Treatments have a different weighting based on extended life extension. So it's kind of a long drawn out number of factors, but really at its core level, everything's looked at in a decision tree, and that weighs everything against every other option across the network. Now, as far as dollars allocated for each treatment, depending on what we've done in previous years, we can, there's plenty of human element to it where we'll modify, if we see areas that the program isn't necessarily selecting, but we want to focus more on preservation, we can kind of shift some funding to accommodate that. I would say the optimized approach after we run a scenario is something like 75 to 80% accurate, and then there's a bit of field inspection to verify those results and some adjustment to what the optimized output was.
How is your backlog calculated?
So I don't have it in front of me, but I will pull that calculation and I can share it back. I don't know, has my email address been advertised, Lindsay?
It has not, but I'm about to put it up for sale.
throw it up there. If you want to shoot me an email on that, I can show you the calculation there.
Let's go ahead and can you put that in the chat for all of us? Allie, would you be able to do that? Or if you could do that, Austin, either one would be great. One question, you mentioned that you benchmark against some of the PPRA life expectancy and what they share on the treatment toolbox. What did you find when comparing your data to those sort of industry standards? Did they line up or how did they compare?
I think we're pretty much right down the middle. I think there was, can we go back to our treatment slide? Are you able to pull that up?
Ooh, I think so.
Let's see here. I might have it in front of me. Yeah.
All right, here you go. You want the treatment slide, Austin? Here you go.
Yeah, so I think we were right in line with everything kind of that we're showing on this slide here. I think that the let's see, I think the scrub seal, I think it was the scrub seal that fluctuated a little bit. That was maybe a little bit less than what you were showing on the PPRA website. But outside of that, I think everything was pretty much in line.
I'll also just, so you guys know where everything came from on the treatment toolbox here in the treatment resource center. In any one of these treatments, if you click on expectations, you can see, you know, optimum performance, average performance, and stopgap performance depending on the PCI of the road at the time that you apply the treatment. And you can see these different life extensions. What we took to populate the calculator tools for the whole site was the average. So, so that's what we took as a starter point. Again, you can customize it to you. We wanted it to be a right down the middle prediction. We hear many agencies getting more than what's shown on the site as the average. And you're experiencing that too a little bit, aren't you, Austin? Didn't you tell me that you're actually starting to see things come in a little bit, lasting a little bit longer than you have programmed?
Yeah, so we actually just a week or two ago actually implemented this in the software, but we noticed that our PCI in our outer years in our projections was dropping off a little bit more than we expected. And with our third round of inspections, 6 years of data now, we plotted that against what our degradation curve looked like for those treatments and found that, yeah, we're actually less aggressive than what we had in the system. So, you know, even though we are underfunded, those PCIs at the end of that 8-year scenario aren't as bad in our network as we're projecting based on the adjustment we made just a couple weeks ago.
That's awesome. Well, we have a handful more questions, but they get just a little bit more specific. So and I know we're about 7 minutes over here. So we'll send those to you, Austin, and ask you to finish filling that out. Make sure if you guys enjoyed this that you tune in for the next webinar. You're connected to us on our e-newsletter, social media, and think about joining that road kit training. That is a pretty valuable offering, I think, that we put off. So Austin, again, congratulations on the Sorensen Award, very well deserved. And I was so excited to interview you today and just kind of share the story of what you guys have done at Polk County. It is really inspiring. And as a taxpayer, even, it's, you know, it makes you proud and kind of hopeful that, that you have leaders out there who are just bound and determined to make absolute best decisions they can with the resources they have. So thanks for taking the time to share with us today.
Sure, and thanks for having us. You know, as Polk County's representative, we appreciate the recognition. Definitely appreciate Mott McDonald, which was our consultant that helped us through this process, Agile Assets, software package we've used to get where we are today, as well as Ergon for submitting our recommendation for the Sorensen Award. That was greatly appreciated here within Polk County.
Awesome. And we just got a little comment that they think this is the best PPRA webinar ever, Austin. So
glad to be a part of it.
I'll tell you what. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.